Humanity had spread its influence far across the stars, inhabiting planets in distant solar systems and forging tenuous but valuable alliances with various alien species. The Intergalactic Council, which once held supreme power over a vast swath of the galaxy, was dominated by human ingenuity and drive. From towering space stations to glittering cityscapes on terraformed worlds, humanity had come to symbolize hope and prosperity among the stars. However, beneath the surface of peace, unease stirred in the darkest corners of the galaxy. Erin Cade, a diplomat stationed on the remote human colony of Darkale, had just completed a routine peace negotiation with the Scaretil, a reptilian species from a neighboring system. The Scaretil were unpredictable, but had proven valuable trade partners. Erin, a sharp-eyed strategist and former soldier, had no illusions about the fragile peace that existed between the Scaretil and humanity. Yet, as he watched the sun set behind the colony's glass dome, something felt wrong. The air was thick with tension. It was then that a transmission came through on his encrypted channel, a message from a mysterious source. The message was simple but chilling. The Tselna are coming. At first, Erin dismissed it as a hoax. The Tselna were a myth, an ancient alien empire thought to have fallen into oblivion centuries ago. Their legacy was one of brutal conquest, and their disappearance had been widely celebrated. Yet, as he dug deeper into the transmission's origin, the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. The message had come from a high-ranking military officer within the Intergalactic Council, someone who had gone silent for months. Erin's heart raced as he decoded the hidden files attached to the message. What he uncovered was far more terrifying than anything he could have imagined. A vast, dormant fleet of the Tselna was preparing to launch an assault on humanity. The warships, massive and heavily armed, were scattered in pockets throughout the galaxy, waiting for the moment to strike. The Tselna had been biding their time, watching and studying humanity's expansion. They had waited for a time when humanity had grown complacent, when they would least expect it. In a panic, Erin attempted to send a warning to the nearest human fleet, only to be met with static and dead silence. His messages bounced between different channels, but nothing came through. Desperation clawed at him as he realized something was terribly wrong. The transmission had been meant to reach him, but now he could sense something dark lurking on the horizon. Someone was trying to silence him. Erin made his way to the secure communications hub within the colony's heart, determined to send a message to the council himself. But as he approached, an explosion rocked the colony, sending debris flying and shaking the entire building. He barely managed to find cover as blinding lights filled the hallways. The Tselna had arrived, and their invasion began in the most brutal way imaginable. The building's systems went dark, and alarms wailed through the colony as Tselna soldiers, clad in their trademark black and crimson armor, stormed every corridor. Their terrifyingly precise attacks left no room for resistance. The Tselna had been planning this for years, and their tactics were flawless. They knew exactly where to strike, and they struck hard. Erin ducked into a side corridor, his heart racing as gunfire erupted around him. He needed to survive, but more than that, he needed to warn humanity. He knew that if the Tselna were here, it wasn't just Darkale at risk, it was the entire human race. As the planet's defenses scrambled to repel the invaders, Erin found a secure escape pod and sent a distress signal to the council, hoping it would get through. The Tselna are not just coming, they're here. They're everywhere, he gasped into the mic, his voice strained with fear. Prepare yourselves. The war has begun. The pod shot into space, and as Erin looked back at the burning world below, he knew it was just the first strike. The universe was about to be consumed by a war that would shatter it all. With only a few messages escaping the ravages of the invasion, the fate of humanity now rested on the message he had sent. Would they believe it in time? Could they stop the Tselna before it was too late? The universe had begun to tremble under the weight of a threat humanity had never truly considered, and Erin Cade, once a diplomat, was now the last hope for an entire galaxy on the brink of war. Aaron Cade's escape pod drifted through the vast emptiness of space, a small, fragile thing in a galaxy suddenly on the verge of total chaos. The pod's inertial dampeners hummed quietly as it accelerated toward the nearest human military outpost, but even in the relative safety of the pod's cramped interior, Aaron could feel the weight of what was happening pressing in on him. The transmission had barely gotten through to the Council, but he had no way of knowing if it would be enough to save them. His heart raced as he punched in the coordinates, praying the military would pick him up. He was almost there when the comms unit in the pod crackled to life. The voice on the other end was strained, urgent. "Aaron, is that you? This is Captain Alana Rivers. Where are you? We've just received reports of massive Xel'Na fleet movements near Darkale. Are you safe?" Alana's voice sent a jolt of relief through Aaron. Alana Rivers, legendary strategist and leader of humanity's deep space defense, had always been someone he admired. If anyone could help them turn the tide, it was her. "I'm alive, Captain," Aaron responded, trying to steady his voice. "But the situation is worse than we thought. The Xel'Na have already attacked Darkale. They've launched a full-scale invasion. I barely got out in time." "Damn it," Alana muttered under her breath. "We've been receiving similar reports across the entire quadrant. It's not just Darkale. Xel'Na warships are emerging from hidden systems all over the galaxy, and they're hitting human colonies with unprecedented force. The reports are coming in too fast. We're getting overwhelmed." Aaron clenched his fists. "It's worse than we could have imagined. I tried to warn the Council, but their comms were jammed. The Xel'Na. This isn't just an invasion. It's a massacre. They've been planning this for years. What are they after?" Alana's voice crackled through the comms, steady despite the chaos around her. "What do they want from us?" "I don't know, but I've heard rumors. Rumors that the Xel'Na have developed a new weapon, something more deadly than anything we've ever seen." Aaron's mind flashed back to the message he had received before his escape. A chilling thought crept into his mind. "The Blood Knight. They're targeting our core worlds, Alana. If they succeed, the human race won't just be defeated. It will be wiped from existence." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Alana's voice returned, now even colder. "Get to the Terran fleet's rally point. I'm mobilizing a counteroffensive, but we're going to need every ship, every soldier. And you're going to need to tell me everything you know about the Xel'Na. This ends now." Aaron nodded, even though she couldn't see him. He knew what Alana was capable of, but he also knew that humanity was no longer fighting an enemy they could outthink. The Xel'Na were ancient, intelligent, and relentless. They would stop at nothing to achieve their goal. The next few hours felt like an eternity. The pod finally reached the rally point, a massive fleet of human warships gathering for what was supposed to be a routine defense mission. Now, it was the last line of defense for the human race. Aaron was greeted by a team of soldiers who escorted him to a command center aboard the flagship Indomitable, the pride of the Terran fleet. Captain Alana Rivers was waiting for him. She looked every bit the hardened veteran that she was, her eyes sharp, her posture stiff with resolve. But even she couldn't hide the weariness in her eyes. The war had come so fast, so violently, that even her confidence was beginning to fray at the edges. "Aaron, we need answers," she said, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. "What are we up against? What kind of weapons do the Xel'Na have, and how do we stop them?" Aaron took a deep breath, steeling himself. He could already feel the weight of this moment, the burden of humanity's survival resting on his shoulders. "The Xel'Na have more than just advanced ships and weaponry," Aaron began, his voice heavy with the knowledge he carried. "They've created something called the Blood Knight. It's a genetically engineered soldier, but not just any soldier. These warriors are enhanced beyond comprehension, faster, stronger, deadlier than anything we've ever encountered. They lead their forces, and the stories I've heard, They've wiped out entire fleets with a single strike. They're the tip of the spear. Alana's jaw tightened. One soldier? One soldier can do all that. Erin nodded grimly. They've been preparing for this for centuries. These Blood Knights are their ultimate weapon. If we don't stop them, they'll crush us. Then we'll crush them first, Alana said, a fire igniting in her eyes. The room went silent as the weight of their task settled in. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a fight for the future of humanity. With the Xel'Na's forces closing in and their new weapon looming, Alana knew they had no time to waste. They would need every resource, every ship, and every fighter if they were to have any hope of stopping the invasion. As the command center hummed with preparations for battle, Erin looked out the viewport at the vastness of space, knowing that the next few days could determine the fate of everything they had worked so hard to build. The Indomitable surged forward, cutting through the void of space like a blade through flesh. The fleet gathered around it, a collection of humanity's finest ships, all forged for this singular moment, defending against an enemy they barely understood. As Erin Cage stood in the command center, watching the stars blink past the viewport, he felt the weight of history pressing down on him. The human race had come so far, but now, in this fleeting moment, everything was at risk. Captain Alana Rivers stood beside him, her arms folded across her chest, her eyes narrowed in thought. "We've got to hit them hard before they can organize a full-scale assault," she said, her voice low and focused. "But the Xel'Na have more tricks up their sleeves than we're prepared for." Erin nodded, his mind racing. He had seen the raw, horrifying power of the Blood Knights firsthand. As the reports from Darkale had painted a grim picture of their assault, his mind kept returning to the image of Marcus, his brother, transformed into one of these bioengineered warriors. Marcus had once been his closest companion, his confidant. Now, as a Blood Knight, he was a weapon of unimaginable destruction. It wasn't just the power of the Blood Knights that terrified Erin. It was the whispers of their abilities. These warriors were more than just enhanced soldiers. They were bred for war, their minds reprogrammed to obey without question, and they were capable of feats that defied human comprehension. One of them could decimate a fleet in a matter of hours, and humanity's only hope rested on stopping them before they spread across the galaxy. "Alana," Erin spoke, his voice tight with emotion. "I need to go to their homeworld. I need to stop Marcus before he becomes the force that breaks us." Alana turned to him, her gaze unwavering. "I know you've lost a lot, Erin, but this isn't just about one soldier. If the Blood Knights are the Xel'Na's secret weapon, taking down Marcus might give us an edge. But we can't risk everything on one man. We need a plan." "I am the plan," Erin replied, his voice a whisper of steel. "Marcus is their leader. Without him, the Blood Knights will lose their guiding force. If I can get to him, maybe I can free him from whatever has been done to him." Alana met his eyes, seeing the determination that burned in them. It was clear he wasn't going to back down. Finally, she nodded. "Fine, but you won't be doing it alone. I'll send a team with you. We need to extract as much intelligence from their homeworld as we can." The next hours were filled with frantic preparations. The Indomitable would continue its engagement with the Xel'Na's forces, while a small, elite team would slip into enemy territory, infiltrating the heart of the Xel'Na Empire. Erin, Alana, and a few trusted soldiers would board a stealth vessel and make their way to the Xel'Na homeworld. As they neared the coordinates, Erin's pulse quickened. His heart ached with the thought of confronting Marcus. What would he find when he faced his brother? Would Marcus even recognize him, or had the transformation completely erased who he once was? The stealth ship dropped out of warp, its cloaking devices keeping it hidden from the ever-watchful eyes of the Xel'Na. Outside the ship's viewports, the dark expanse of the Xel'Na homeworld loomed, a planet once rich with history, now marred by the scars of war. It was a place of shadows, ruled by an ancient race bent on domination. Erin couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. The Xel'Na were cunning, and the Blood Knights, Marcus, could be waiting for them. His thoughts were interrupted when the ship's captain, Lieutenant Soren, broke in over the comms. "Sir, we've detected an anomaly," Soren reported, his voice tense. "There's a fleet on the move. We're not alone here. Can we evade them?" Alana asked, her hand hovering over the controls, ready to take action. Soren's fingers flew across the controls, sweat beading on his brow. "I'm doing my best, but they're closing in fast. If we don't act now, they'll detect us." The crew was quiet for a moment, the weight of the decision settling over them. They had no choice. This was their only chance. The planet was too close to risk a retreat. "Prepare for atmospheric entry," Alana ordered, her voice sharp. "We're going in. Now." The ship jolted as they began their descent, dodging bursts of plasma fire from Selna interceptors. The stealth ship's hull groaned under the stress of atmospheric entry as they cut through the thick clouds. With every passing second, the danger grew more intense. "Erin, get ready," Alana said, her voice calm but laced with urgency. "This isn't going to be easy. If we can land undetected, we might have a chance to reach the facility where they're holding Marcus. We've got one shot at this." As the planet's surface grew closer, Erin's mind flashed back to the last time he had seen his brother, before that Selena took him. The young man who had stood by his side, fighting for a better future, was now a ghost in the machine, a weapon of destruction. The ship's engines roared as they broke through the atmosphere, the air growing thick with the heat of re-entry. Erin's pulse quickened, but his resolve didn't waver. Whatever awaited them on the surface, he was ready. He would save Marcus or die trying. The ship shuddered violently as it cut through the dense atmosphere of the Selna homeworld, its stealth systems working overtime to mask their descent. Outside, the sky was a deep crimson, reflecting the blood-red landscape below. Jagged mountain ranges sprawled across the horizon, and the surface of the planet seemed scared, as if the very land had been torn apart by endless wars. "Prepare for landing." Alana's voice was firm, though the tension was evident beneath her calm demeanor. "Get ready for a fight the moment we hit the ground." Erin didn't need to be told twice. His fingers tightened around the grips of his weapons, the weight of his pulse rifle a comforting presence in his hands. Every instinct in his body screamed that this was not going to be easy. The Selna weren't just formidable fighters. They were relentless hunters, and they would stop at nothing to prevent them from reaching their objective. The ship lurched as it made contact with the barren surface, a cloud of dust billowing up around them. For a brief moment, everything was still. The team sat in silence, the tension palpable, each member preparing for what was to come. "Stay sharp," Alana ordered, her eyes scanning the ship's interior. "Soren, you're on point. Erin, follow me." Erin nodded, his heart racing in his chest as the ship's hatch opened. The air was thick, humid, and smelled faintly of burnt metal. The landscape around them was unforgiving, a jagged wasteland of craggy rock and decaying structures. They had landed just outside what appeared to be a ruined city, a once vibrant metropolis now reduced to ash and rubble, its inhabitants long since gone. The team disembarked in a tight formation, weapons raised, every sense alert. Erin's thoughts were fixed on one thing: the Blood Knight. The thought of Marcus, twisted into one of these monstrous soldiers, consumed his every waking moment. He couldn't afford to fail. Not this time. Alana turned to him, her voice steady. "This way. The facility that holds Marcus is just ahead. We need to move quickly." They pressed on, the dry ground crunching beneath their boots as they moved through the desolate city. The ruins whispered of a forgotten past, of a once great civilization brought to its knees by its own ambition. Erin couldn't help but feel the weight of history in the air. This was a place where wars were fought, where that Selena had once ruled with absolute power. Now it was their battleground, and humanity was an unwelcome intruder. The further they advanced, the more tense the atmosphere became. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, Every sound echoed too loudly in the stillness of the ruins. The Selna were close, their presence lingering like a predator waiting for its prey to make a mistake. Suddenly, a harsh screech split the air, and Erin's instincts kicked in. Without warning, a dozen Selna warriors emerged from the shadows, their crimson armor gleaming in the dim light. Their eyes were cold, devoid of humanity, their movements unnaturally fast. The Blood Knights, no doubt about it. Ambush, Alana shouted, diving behind cover as the first wave of plasma fire streaked toward them. Erin moved instinctively, his body already in motion as he sprinted toward the nearest pillar of wreckage, taking cover just in time. The Selna warriors were fast, faster than he had imagined. They charged with terrifying precision, their weapons crackling with lethal energy. But they weren't his target. Not yet. Form a perimeter, Alana barked. We need to hold them off long enough to reach the facility. Erin's heart pounded as he returned fire, his rifle crackling with energy as it tore through the air. The Selna seemed unfazed by the shots, their armored exoskeletons absorbing most of the blasts. One of the soldiers lunged at him with a vicious roar, its blade slicing through the air with deadly speed. Erin sidestepped just in time, drawing his sidearm and firing point-blank. The shot pierced the warrior's side, but the creature didn't stop. It lashed out with a spiked fist, sending Erin crashing into the ground. Pain exploded in his chest, but his training took over. With a grunt, he rolled away, barely avoiding the warrior's next strike. His pulse raced, the adrenaline coursing through his veins as he pushed himself up and fired again, this time hitting the creature square in the helmet. It crumpled to the ground in a heap. Stay focused. Alana's voice cut through the chaos. She was already directing the others, keeping them in position, while Erin caught his breath. He wiped blood from his lip, his chest heaving. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was personal. The Blood Knights were here, and Marcus was somewhere among them. Every movement, every strike, was a reminder that his brother was no longer the man he once knew. He could only hope that Marcus still lived beneath the monster they had created. Move out, Alana commanded, and the group pressed forward, fighting their way through the ambush. The Selna warriors were relentless, but humanity was not without its resolve. The team made it to the entrance of the facility, a dark, foreboding structure carved into the side of a massive mountain. The door was heavily reinforced, but a few well-placed charges made short work of it. The way inside was clear. Ready? Alana asked, her eyes meeting Erin's. Erin nodded, his heart heavy but determined. Let's end this. They stepped inside, their boots echoing in the silence. The darkness was oppressive, but ahead, a faint light flickered. It was the final confrontation. Marcus, the Blood Knight, and the future of humanity hanging in the balance. The doors of the facility groaned open, revealing the cold, metallic interior. The air inside was thick with the scent of decay, a reminder that this place had been abandoned for far too long. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint hum of distant machinery. As Erin stepped into the darkened corridor, his breath caught in his throat. This was where it had all begun, the Selna's twisted experiments, the birthplace of the Blood Knights. And now, it would be where he would either save his brother or lose him forever. The team moved in a tight formation, weapons raised and scanning every corner. Alana led the way, her eyes scanning for any sign of movement, her hand never straying far from her sidearm. They had no idea what waited for them in this facility, but they were prepared for the worst. Erin's mind was focused entirely on one thing: finding Marcus. He knew that what stood before him wasn't his brother anymore. What the Selna had done to him was beyond anything Erin could comprehend. But even so, he couldn't shake the hope that somewhere beneath the monstrous facade, Marcus was still there. And if there was even the slightest chance to bring him back, Erin would take it. They reached the center of the facility, a vast, cavernous chamber. It was filled with strange, pulsating lights and humming machinery, the walls lined with thick cables and control panels that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. At the far end of the room stood a massive, reinforced door, its surface covered in strange, alien symbols. "This is it," Alana said, her voice low and steady. "The central control room. If Marcus is here, this is where they'll be keeping him." Erin's heart raced as he stepped forward, his fingers brushing the smooth surface of the door. There was something about this place that felt wrong, a sense of deep unease that gnawed at the edges of his consciousness. But he didn't have time to dwell on it. He had to focus. "Stay alert," Alana warned, before tapping a few commands into the nearby console. The door hissed open with a soft whir, revealing what lay beyond. The room was cold, dark, and sterile, its walls lined with strange tanks that hummed with energy. Inside each tank, Erin could make out the vague shapes of humanoid figures suspended in a glowing, viscous fluid. He didn't need to get any closer to know what they were. Each of them was a failed experiment, a victim of the Tselna's twisted ambitions. The Blood Knights were born from these tanks, their minds and bodies altered beyond recognition. At the far end of the room, a massive platform stood, surrounded by alien machinery. On the platform lay a figure, his body strapped down with thick cables and tubes, his chest rising and falling with mechanical assistance. The shape was unmistakable: broad shoulders, a strong jawline, and dark hair. Marcus. But the man lying there was not the brother Erin had once known. The Blood Knight was an abomination. His skin had taken on a pale, almost translucent quality, veins glowing faintly beneath the surface. His eyes were completely devoid of humanity, solid, emotionless white, staring blankly ahead, as if the very concept of self-awareness had been stripped away. His body was covered in armor, the same dark crimson exoskeleton that all Blood Knights wore, but it was clear this was not just a suit. It had become one with him, a part of his flesh. Erin's throat tightened, his heart aching as he stared at the shell of the man he used to call brother. The transformation was complete. "What have they done to you, Marcus?" Erin whispered, his voice breaking. Alana stepped forward, her voice hard. "We don't have much time. The Xel'Naga will be looking for us. We need to act now." Erin didn't respond, his gaze fixed on Marcus's lifeless form. This was his brother, but it wasn't. Somewhere, deep inside that shell of a man, Erin hoped there was still a glimmer of the person he had once known. He had to try. He had to reach him. With a sudden movement, Erin rushed toward the platform, his fingers reaching for the cables that bound Marcus's limbs. He ripped them free, his hands shaking. Alana called out to him, but he couldn't stop. He couldn't leave his brother here to be used as a weapon any longer. He had to save him. The moment the last cable was torn away, Marcus's body convulsed violently. Erin jumped back, his heart racing. The once lifeless form suddenly came to life, twitching and jerking as though awakening from a long sleep. "Erin." A raspy, unfamiliar voice whispered, but it was unmistakably Marcus. His eyes fluttered open, and for a moment there was a flicker of recognition in them. "Erin, is that you?" Erin's breath caught in his throat. "Marcus, it's me. I've come for you." But before Marcus could respond, a sharp noise rang out from the far side of the room. The door slammed shut, and Erin spun around to see a group of Tselna soldiers entering, their faces twisted in rage. Behind them stood a figure taller, more imposing than the rest, a Blood Knight, but different. This one was clad in even more elaborate armor, the symbol of the Tselna's elite forces etched into its chest. "I see you've decided to rescue the failure." The Blood Knight's voice was deep, a cruel mockery of human speech. "Too bad for you. It's too late." Erin's heart sank. It was the leader of the Blood Knights, Marcus's commander. And if they didn't act fast, Marcus would be lost to them forever. The team formed a defensive line, weapons raised, but Erin knew this would be their greatest challenge yet. He had no choice but to fight for his brother, no matter what the cost. The chamber seemed to close in around them, the oppressive atmosphere thick with tension as the Selna soldiers advanced, their eyes burning with hatred. The Blood Knight leader, tall and imposing in his battle-worn armor, stared down at Erin and the team, his face hidden behind the dark visor of his helmet. "You really think you can take him from us?" The Blood Knight leader's voice resonated through the room, cold and mocking. He raised a hand, signaling to his subordinates, "Eliminate them, but leave the traitor for last. I want to watch his humanity crumble before me." The Selna soldiers surged forward, their weapons crackling with lethal energy. Erin's heart hammered in his chest. This was it. There was no room for hesitation. If he didn't act quickly, Marcus might slip away from him forever, consumed by the same monstrous will that had twisted the Selna into these bloodthirsty warriors. "Alana, cover the left flank," Erin shouted, raising his pulse rifle. "We need to hold them off while I get to Marcus." Alana didn't need another word. She dropped into position, her rifle flashing as she unleashed a barrage of plasma bolts that tore through the air. The Selna soldiers scattered, seeking cover as their shields flared with every shot. The noise of battle exploded around them as Erin dove toward Marcus, ignoring the chaos and gunfire. Behind him, he could hear the thundering footsteps of the Blood Knight leader, his voice cold and full of contempt. "You're too late, Erin Cade. He's already mine. This is the fate of all who oppose us." Erin's mind was laser-focused on Marcus. He reached the platform where his brother lay, still trembling from the brutal assault on his body and mind. Marcus's eyes flickered again, and Erin saw a brief moment of recognition, a flicker of the man he once was. "Marcus," Erin pleaded, his voice trembling with urgency. "It's me. You have to fight them. You're not one of them." But the Blood Knight's eyes remained vacant, clouded by the overwhelming control of the Selena. A soft, strangled laugh escaped Marcus's lips, a sound that chilled Erin to the bone. "You think I can just remember who I was?" Marcus's voice was distorted, an unnatural blend of his old self and the cold, empty machine he had become. "The past is gone, Erin. I am the Blood Knight now. I am nothing but a weapon." Erin's hand shot out, grasping his brother's arm. "No, Marcus, you're still in there. I know it. I won't let them take you." But before Erin could react, the Blood Knight leader moved. His massive form lunged forward, striking with a speed and strength that caught Erin off guard. He was sent crashing to the ground, his breath knocked out of him. The leader's voice rumbled in his ears as he stood over him. "Foolish human, you cannot save him. The Blood Knights are beyond redemption, and now you will pay for your defiance." Erin struggled to breathe, his hands gripping the cold floor beneath him. The Blood Knight leader raised his weapon, a large, jagged energy blade that crackled with power. It was going to end here, in this forsaken facility, unless Erin could do something. Out of the corner of his eye, Erin saw Alana and the rest of the team fighting desperately against the Selna soldiers, their energy blasts lighting up the dark room. But they were being overrun. Erin was the only one who could get to Marcus. Gathering every ounce of his strength, Erin rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the leader's blade as it came crashing down with lethal force. The ground where it struck cracked and splintered, sending sparks flying. Erin pushed himself up with the last of his strength, his mind racing. He couldn't let Marcus stay like this, not after everything. The Blood Knight leader sneered at him, then turned his gaze back to Marcus. "Your brother has already made his choice. He is ours now. Nothing you do will change that." Erin's hands tightened around his weapon. He wasn't ready to accept that. Not without a fight. "Then I'll force you to change," Erin muttered through gritted teeth. He fired a rapid burst from his rifle, sending bolts of energy streaking toward the leader. The shots landed, but the Blood Knight's armor absorbed them without even a tremor. The leader chuckled, raising his blade once more. Pathetic. In a split second, the Blood Knight lunged, aiming to strike Erin down. But just as the blade descended, a blast rang out from behind him. The shot was precise, powerful, and it hit its mark. The leader's movement faltered as he turned, his posture momentarily disoriented. It was Alana, her rifle lowered, smoke rising from the barrel. She had taken the shot. "Aaron, move," she yelled, her voice sharp. Aaron didn't hesitate. He dove at Marcus, his hand shaking as he grabbed his brother's arm and pulled him from the platform. The Blood Knight leader roared in fury behind them, but Aaron's focus was entirely on Marcus. The team covered them, fighting with everything they had to hold off the remaining Selna forces. "Marcus, listen to me," Aaron pleaded, his voice barely a whisper. "You can still fight this. Don't let them control you." Marcus's body trembled, his chest rising and falling erratically, as though fighting against the biological programming coursing through his veins. His hand twitched, his eyes flickering with the faintest hint of recognition. For a brief moment, it seemed like Aaron's words were reaching him. Then, the Blood Knight leader advanced again, his fury uncontained. Aaron's grip on Marcus tightened as he pushed him toward the exit. They had to get out. Now. "Move," Alana shouted again, firing at the leader to buy them precious seconds. The team sprinted through the facility, the sound of pursuit close behind them. The escape was chaotic, frantic, but they were running out of time. Aaron glanced at Marcus, whose movements were slow and erratic. "Stay with me, brother. Please." The facility seemed to be collapsing around them as Aaron, Marcus, and the team sprinted through the dark corridors. The sound of the Blood Knight leader's fury echoed behind them, each footstep a reminder that they were being hunted. The air grew thick with the acrid scent of burning metal, and the walls trembled as if the entire complex were on the verge of collapse. Time was running out. "Move faster," Alana barked, her voice cutting through the chaos as she covered their retreat, her rifle flashing with deadly precision. "We can't let them catch us here." Aaron's heart raced, his mind focused solely on Marcus, whose body was trembling with the strain of his internal battle. The once steady rhythm of his brother's breathing was erratic now, as though the control they had over him was weakening. Aaron refused to look back, but he could feel the presence of the Blood Knight leader drawing nearer. They were close to the exit, but it might as well have been a lifetime away. "Aaron, stay with me, please," Marcus's voice rasped from his side. It was barely a whisper, distorted and weak, but it was still Marcus, the real Marcus. I can't." "Don't say that," Aaron interrupted urgently, his hand gripping his brother's arm. "You're still in there, Marcus. I know you are. Fight it." The man beside him, the Blood Knight, was a far cry from the brother Aaron had grown up with. But as they ran, Aaron caught glimpses of the Marcus he remembered, moments of clarity in his brother's haunted eyes, flickers of recognition that gave him hope. For a brief second, the fire that once burned in Marcus's spirit resurfaced, and Aaron clung to that with everything he had. Alana turned a sharp corner ahead, and the rest of the team followed closely behind. "Get to the ship. Now," she shouted. Aaron barely heard her words. His focus was on Marcus, whose steps had begun to slow. Every time the team rounded a corner, Aaron had to pull his brother along, the heavy weight of his armor and the mental strain taking its toll. His pulse quickened with the realization that they might not make it in time. They rounded another bend, and the door to the ship was in sight. Aaron's heart soared with relief, but only for a moment. A guttural growl sounded from behind them. It was the Blood Knight leader, his deep voice vibrating with pure malice. "You can't escape. This ends now." Aaron looked over his shoulder, only to see the hulking figure of the leader emerging from the shadows. His massive blade shimmered ominously as it crackled with energy, and his eyes, those blank, soulless eyes, fixed on Marcus. "You belong to me, Marcus," the leader said, his voice cold and mocking. "You're one of us now." Marcus's entire body seized as though the word struck a deep chord within him. His head jerked to the side, eyes flashing with a brief, violent flicker of recognition. A low growl rumbled in his throat, his fists clenching at his sides. "No," Marcus rasped, his voice raw and strained. I'm not one of you." Erin's heart skipped a beat. For a moment, his brother's voice was clear, undistorted, untainted by the Xel'Na's programming. Marcus's hands trembled, and his gaze fixed on the Blood Knight leader. "You took everything from me," Marcus said, his voice growing stronger. "But I'm not your weapon. I never was." The Blood Knight leader hesitated, his posture stiffening in disbelief. "You think you can defy me?" He spat, stepping forward, his weapon raised high. Before Erin could react, Marcus's body surged with newfound strength. He pushed himself away from Erin's grip, his eyes blazing with fury and clarity. The power of the Blood Knight armor surged through him, but now it seemed to fuel his defiance, not his subjugation. His hand shot out, and with an impossible speed, he wrenched the blade from the Blood Knight leader's grasp, sending it crashing to the floor with a deafening clang. Erin stood frozen, his breath catching in his throat. The Blood Knight leader's eyes widened in shock. "Impossible," he muttered, his voice full of disbelief. "You cannot." Marcus turned to face him, his hands trembling with a mixture of rage and pain. "I am not your monster anymore," Marcus said, his voice rough but filled with undeniable strength. "And I'm not going back." Before anyone could stop him, Marcus grabbed the leader by the throat, lifting him off the ground with terrifying ease. His once lifeless eyes locked onto the leader's with cold finality. "This ends now." The Blood Knight leader gasped for air, his hands scrabbling uselessly at Marcus's unrelenting grip. "No, I am your commander. You belong to me." Marcus's grip tightened, his face a mask of agony and fury. "Not anymore." With a swift motion, he crushed the leader's throat with his bare hand. The room fell silent as the Blood Knight leader's body crumpled to the ground, lifeless. Erin watched in stunned silence, his heart pounding in his chest. For a moment, he couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. Marcus had not only broken free from the Xel'Na's control, but he had destroyed the one who had held him captive for so long. "Marcus," Erin whispered, stepping closer. "You did it." Marcus's eyes flickered once more, the last remnants of the Blood Knight's influence fading from his face. But the battle was far from over. More Xel'Na soldiers were closing in, and the team had to move fast. "Erin, Marcus's voice faltered as his legs buckled beneath him, the mental and physical toll of his struggle taking its final toll. He collapsed into his brother's arms, his breath shallow and labored. "We'll get you out of here," Erin said, his voice full of determination as he scooped Marcus into his arms. He turned to the team, who were already securing the perimeter. "To the ship now. Move." The battle was not over yet, but for the first time in a long while, Erin allowed himself to believe that there was hope. Marcus was still alive, and together they would escape the clutches of the Xel'Na once and for all. The sound of approaching footsteps thundered in the corridors behind them, and Erin's pulse quickened. The Blood Knight leader was dead, but the Xel'Na were not so easily defeated. The facility was vast, and more soldiers would be closing in soon. They had no time to waste. Marcus, still weak from the internal struggle, clung to Erin with the last remnants of his strength, his face pale and strained. But Erin could see it. His brother was finally free. The chains had been broken, and he had reclaimed himself from the grip of the Xel'Na. "Erin," Marcus whispered, his voice rough but clear. "I'm sorry for everything." "Don't say that," Erin replied, his voice tight with emotion. "You fought them. You're back. That's all that matters." But even as Erin spoke, he couldn't shake the deep sense of urgency pressing against him. The team was already pushing forward, weapons raised as they fought their way through the facility. Every second felt like a lifetime as the sound of the enemy's approach grew louder. The Xel'Na weren't going to let them escape without a fight. They reached the door of the ship, a sleek, advanced vessel parked in the shadow of the massive facility. But it was too quiet, too still. Something's wrong, Alana muttered under her breath, her sharp eyes scanning the area. She was right. The ship's hangar was empty. No guards, no patrols. It was as if the enemy knew they were coming, or worse, had set a trap. "Get inside, now," Aaron commanded, urgency in his voice. He ushered Marcus toward the entrance, his gaze flicking nervously to the darkened corners of the hangar. He felt exposed, vulnerable. "Watch the skies," Alana said as she scanned the area one last time before entering the ship. "I don't trust this silence." The door to the ship closed behind them with a soft hiss, and the engines hummed to life. But before they could even make it to the cockpit, a shrill alarm sounded, high-pitched and jarring, echoing through the vessel's corridors. "Get us out of here," Aaron yelled, his hand gripping the controls in the cockpit. His eyes darted between the flashing redouts. Something wasn't right. "Alana, check the rear cameras." Alana's fingers flew over the panel, and her voice was grim when she responded. "There's a ship tailing us, and it's gaining on us fast." Aaron cursed under his breath. The Xel'Na had been prepared for their escape, and now they had a new problem. The ship behind them was a heavy destroyer, and it was closing in quickly. "No time to run," Aaron muttered. "We'll have to fight our way out." He gripped the controls with both hands, steering the ship into a sharp maneuver. The engines roared, and the vessel jerked as it shot forward, the ship's weapon systems coming online with a deep, ominous hum. "Marcus, I need you with me," Aaron shouted over his shoulder. Marcus, still weak but slowly regaining strength, stumbled to his feet, his hand steadying himself on the console. "I'm with you," he said, his voice resolute despite the pain still written across his features. The armor that had once enslaved him now felt almost like a second skin. He was beginning to reclaim it as his own. He could feel the weaponry systems activate beneath his touch, and for the first time, it felt like he was in control. The ship rocked as a volley of plasma shots slammed into their hull, sparks flying from the walls. Aaron cursed again. The enemy ship wasn't just tailing them, it was targeting them. "Alana, get to the weapons bay," Aaron barked. "I need full firepower." Without hesitation, Alana dashed for the rear of the ship. "I'm on it. Cover me." Aaron's hands moved deftly over the controls, his mind racing. The Xel'Na destroyer had positioned itself in the perfect angle to disable their engines, and if they didn't take it out soon, they'd be sitting ducks. They had only one shot. "Marcus," Aaron said, "when Alana gives the signal, I need you to fire the main cannon. Don't hesitate. We don't get a second chance." Marcus nodded, his eyes determined. "I'm ready." The ship shuddered again as another blast hit, this time piercing their shields and sending a shockwave through the interior. The lights flickered, and Aaron's heart sank. They couldn't take many more of those hits. His fingers flew across the controls, racing to reconfigure the power systems. If they were going to survive this, they needed to make a quick escape, but it would require precision. The ship's targeting system locked onto the destroyer. Through the cockpit window, Aaron could see the massive vessel, its black, hulking form looming ever closer. It was a behemoth of destruction, its weapons primed and ready to obliterate them. "Alana, now," Aaron shouted, his voice tight with tension. From the rear of the ship, Alana's voice came over the comms, locked and loaded. "On your mark." "Marcus," Aaron called, his breath steady despite the adrenaline flooding his veins. "Now." With a flick of a switch, Marcus unleashed the full power of their main cannon. The blast shot out, a concentrated beam of pure energy that tore through the vast distance between them and the destroyer. The explosion was deafening, the ship's massive hull cracking and shuddering as the energy pierced its core. For a moment, everything went silent. And then, the destroyer erupted in a fiery explosion. Flames and debris scattered into the void of space, the enemy ship disintegrating in a blaze of light. Aaron let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, his heart pounding in his chest. The danger was far from over, but they had bought themselves precious time. "We're clear," Alana said, a satisfied grin crossing her face. "But we're not out of the woods yet." Erin glanced at Marcus, who was slumped in his seat, breathing heavily but alive. The fight wasn't over. But for the first time since they'd entered the Tselnoff facility, Erin felt a glimmer of hope. They had survived. And with Marcus's redemption, they had proven that even in the darkest corners of the universe, there was always a chance for humanity to rise above. Together, they would fight on, and they would win.